Hi Year 12, welcome to Term 4 Week 2 of your offsite learning adventure with agriculture. So the first thing I thought that I would do today is go through the work that we did last week, just as a bit of revision and to give you guys some things to fill in if you missed the Zoom last week. Thank you to those who did show up to our Zoom. It was really good fun and I appreciate your presence. It was really nice to see you. So hopefully everyone turns up this week and you can get some help with this week's work. Please remember that it is expected that you have a look at the work before you come to the Zoom so that you can ask me any questions that you might have about that. So let's start off by going through what we did last week in our From the Ground Up Plants unit. So this one was an introduction and your task was to have a look at all of these little tidbits of information here and then come on down and do the activity on page 3. So here's what we talked about in our Zoom and the things that we came up with. So your first activity was to make a list of all the agricultural industries you can think of, and the animals that we came up with in the Zoom were sheep, beef, dairy, chickens and pigs, and the plants that we came up with were canola, wheat, oats, carrots and corn. You might have got some different things. You might be able to think of some more industries. Please feel free to put some more down if you can think of them. The next activity was using this image to answer the questions that follow. So in this image, you can see that it's color coded. So anything that's purple is a nature conservation with minimal agricultural use. Anything that's yellow is grazing native vegetation, which you can see there's a lot of in this picture because of our climate. This dark green was production of native forests and so on. So each color represents a different kind of agricultural industry that we perform here in the Central West. So there you can see us there. There's little Dubbo. So the first question in regards to that is, what is the main production industry that you can see around Dubbo? And we identified cropping, which is this dark brown. There's lots and lots of cropping, intensive agricultural practices, and modified pastures. And in our explanation of why we think these are the main production industries, a big reason we identified was the topography or the terrain, because it's quite flat around here. It's really good for growing lots of crops. You wouldn't want to grow crops and things on a hill because it's difficult to do. It's near a water source, which is really important, providing water to our crops. It's a food source for livestock. It's really good for growing livestock around here, again, because of the nice flat topography and the water source. So it's good to grow food for our livestock. It's the right temperature for lots of cropping. It's got the right humidity and climate to do lots of cropping. And also it's easy to transport anything we grow here around Dubbo to those large areas that need agricultural food. So the next question was one that I asked everybody to think of themselves. So we didn't actually go through this one last week. It's one I asked everybody to think about themselves and go away and try and answer this one. So explain why increasing urbanisation will affect agricultural production. Number one is more people living in cities means more people moving away from rural areas for jobs, for living standards, for whatever it is, whatever the reason people are moving away from rural areas into the cities, there's more and more people living in those cities. That means that food needs to travel greater distances from agricultural areas and in much larger quantities to feed all those people that are moving to the cities. If everyone's moving to the city, that's less people in rural areas, and that means less money and less jobs in rural communities. And that includes rural communities that you find around here, like Trangie and Narromine and Gilgandra and all of those places. So even rural communities around here, if people are moving into Dubbo or moving into other cities around the place, leaving the country, then that's less things available for those people in the rural communities. So urbanisation is going to have a really big effect on agriculture in the future. Okay, now let's have a look at week 2, plants in the grand scheme of things. So what you need to do for this week is you need to have a read of all of this information that's here, and it's all about cycling. So it's all about what happens to those plants in the grand scheme of things. Remember that plants are the staple. They are the key to life. It all starts with plants. Even carnivores rely on the presence of plants to survive. And you guys, when you read through this information and do the activities, are going to find out how plants are so important in this big grand scheme of things. And if we didn't have plants, what would happen to those food webs and what would happen to life as we know it? So you need to have a read through all this information. Have a look at this beautiful little chart here. And then there's the activities down here. Now your first activity is a cut and paste, where you've got all of these images here, these pictures, and you need to use the information that you've read and this YouTube clip. If you would like to watch this YouTube clip, use those resources to put all of those images into this food web that you can see above here. Now that YouTube clip is available on my YouTube channel, which you can see here, and it's in the information from the ground up section. So if we go ahead and look at that full playlist, it's got the 2 videos from week 1 there that you can go back and have a look at, and it's got the video on food webs and energy pyramids to give you some extra information to help you complete these activities. So that activity is on page 5. And then there is also an activity on page 6, which is just using the information in the passage, answer the questions. And there's just a bunch of questions there for you to have a look at and answer based on what you've read and based on the video that you've just watched. So pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Please make sure you've had a read of that and had a go at all those questions. If you don't understand everything, don't worry. That's what the Zoom is for. But I need you to have a look, try and understand it yourselves before you come along to the Zoom, and have your questions ready for me in the Zoom so that I can answer them effectively. Remember, any questions you do have to ask are probably questions that other people have too. So that helps in the grand scheme of things to try and get everything straightened out for everybody. When you come to the Zoom, don't have to have your camera on, don't have to actually talk. You can just type things into the chat box if you're not comfortable to actually come along and talk on the Zoom, okay? That's it. That's your task for week 2. I hope that you've had a beautiful weekend, and I can't wait to see your faces in the Zoom on Wednesday. And even more, I can't wait to see your faces in person when we finally get back to school. Have a great day, and I will see you guys soon.